to another edition of What is Your Story? Today, I have the honor of speaking with Eric Ayers. He's the founder of oh God, you're gonna have to tell me. Go ahead. I knew I was gonna mess it up.
EMC Squared. EMC
EMC
Squared.
Squared. I actually
Yeah.
was gonna say that, but a coaching and consulting company focused on helping people in the healthcare industry focus on their own health first. And in
Yeah.
doing so, creating massive change, not just within themselves, but within the organizations they work. And I can't emphasize how much I love this work because it is profound and important that the people who are caring for us know how to take care of themselves, which sadly too often they still don't know how to. So thank you so much for being here, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to share space with you and to share my story. This is fantastic.
Yeah, well, so let's jump right into it. Part of why I wanted to speak with you is you were a pediatric nurse
Mhm.
who was burnt out. And I think for
Yeah.
me, having witnessed many healthcare providers offering services, but knowing that they were burnt out, it was really important for me to kind of have you share your story on how you shifted that experience from burnt out to now empowered and helping other people move through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And excuse me, I love sharing this story because I think a lot of us can relate to it. I don't think I'm the special case that came out with, a unrealistic understanding of how the world is. I think through this, I came out with just a basic understanding of how important it is for me to care for myself in order to care for others, just like you mentioned. So, as you noted, I worked in a pediatric hospital for just under 18 years. And after about the first 10, 12 years, I did not recognize who I was. I was extremely unhealthy, all aspects, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, which was running into every part of my life, my relationships, my marriage, my daughter, my friends. It was just becoming, I mean, now I understand it as being toxic. Like I was the toxic person that was feeding off of trying to find the positive energy from others. But at the time, I was just going through the motions and I was going to work. I mean, granted, I'm going to a place that's filled with kids that just is amazing. It offers love and joy and just excitement from these kids. But for some reason, every time I went into work, it was like walking into negativity and this energy of what am I doing here? And so one day I was working night shifts and I was about to go to work. I looked in the mirror, was like, who are you? And so about to walk out the door, and my wife grabbed me and she was like, hey, when you go to work tonight, look for something good because it's there. And I was like, whatever. But ultimately, what she did was she charged me with the ability for me to ask myself a question: what is good in this perceived bad situation? Because I was perceiving it as bad. So I went into work. It's like, okay. And then I walked into this room and I met this dad who, for the first time outside of family, showed me a humanity that I've never felt before. Like, and I'm caring for his daughter, but he's showing me kindness and love that I didn't recognize. And then of course his daughter, this 4-year old, just a beautiful soul, just showed me unconditional love. And I was like, what is going on? So that started everything. And from then on, I started seeing it from a different lens. And the interesting thing is, it's always been there. It was always there. It was just what I chose to see, right? And
Yeah.
that was the incredible thing. To me, it was brand new. It was like I just walked in. It's like I changed jobs and I went into a different building, but it's the same place with the same people I worked with. And all of a sudden, everything started shifting because now, Wayne Dyer would say, if you don't like the way you see something, change the way you look at it, and the things you look at will change. Well,
Yep.
that's what happened. Everything I looked at started changing because I saw the other side of it. And that was the start of my journey.
That's beautiful. And I'm curious. So, 18 years working in nursing, do you know what caused you to become so jaded? Or is it just a slow evolution of kind of doing the same thing over and over and not feeling rewarded? I'm curious.
That's a that's an excellent question. I think it's a combination of a lot of things, and definitely, my ego wasn't being fed the way that it needed to be at that time, because that's what I was driving with, was it was ego led. So of course, I'm trying to move up the ranks, but I'm being a jerk, like, and I'm not going at it the right way. I'm not being, a team player. But I'm expected, my personal expectation is, how good I am. Like, why aren't you letting me get a raise? Why aren't you letting me become manager? So on and so forth. And then that switch was like, no, no, no. How can I add value to this situation, to the team? And ultimately, I just became the person that flipped perspectives. So you come up to me and you start saying anything negative, like, I'm gonna flip it and say, yeah, but have you thought about this? And so people
Yeah.
loved it, so people hated it. But up until that point, I think it was a lot of things. It was what I was feeding my body. And when I say feeding my body, I mean the food that was going in it, the thoughts that were going in it, the the TV that I was watching, the YouTube videos, like the Netflix, the type of things I was feeding myself with, that actually manifested in not only the negative thought patterns, but also in a physical illness that was part of this story. And it became like my own hell that I wouldn't trade for the world, because from that I was able to start branching out. But from that, like, I developed a misdiagnosed GI issue that led me on this crazy cool journey into Eastern medicine. And the understanding, and this is crazy to even say out loud, because we've been indoctrinated with the Western medicine, especially working in that to say our bodies have the capacity to heal ourselves, and to learn how to do that was like mind blowing. And it was just, I don't know, it's like a layer was removed and you could see the world differently. And then you can look at people with empathy and say, I want you to see what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
But it's everyone's on their own journey. And that was
Yeah.
the hard part, is telling everyone this is what you need to do, this, because I was so excited, because I knew what it did for me, but understanding, wait, this is my journey and that's your journey. And so um yeah.
Well, something so powerful, and I agree, is we get to choose the perspective we have around any situation in any given time. And the perspective that most people are taught and conditioned to choose is the one that keeps them disempowered and in victimization. And the one that you ultimately chose, the one that I also learned through suffering, is okay, same situation, but if I view it or look at it differently, now I'm empowered, because even if the situation doesn't change, I
Yeah.
now have a different set of choices I can make to
Right.
shift me out of that situation if it doesn't serve me, or I can't shift my perspective to one that makes me feel good. And so that's really, really important to highlight. And I love that that's kind of where you were kind of taken so that you could now show up and help other people in that same process.
Yes, and that is thank you for clarifying and pointing that out, because absolutely, because we come to the table with our own paradigms that were created from this habitual pattern throughout our lives. It's not even our thoughts, it's not even our reactions, it's someone else's that was transposed onto us, and it's just our normal. And that, to me, that was the suffering, that was the uncomfortableness of shifting out of the old Eric's paradigm that wasn't his, and tapping into, like, who am I and what is my purpose here? Because to go back to your question, my ultimate dilemma and what caused me to be at this state was the fact that I was living someone else's purpose. I wasn't living mine. I wasn't
Yep.
tapping into it. And so that misalignment threw me completely off balance. And finally, that imbalance was like, I finally felt it and was like, no, this is tipping the way opposite way. And I think that's different for everyone.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, I think, as you mentioned, like that struggle is the number one way for us to realize we're not aligned with what we need to be aligned with.
Well, so but let's talk about that though too, because you and I have had different but similar paths, right?
Right.
So now you shift this perspective within your job, but you really don't know yourself yet because now you have these old set of beliefs that you know,
Oh,
but you know they don't
yes.
serve you. You
Yes.
don't really know which beliefs serve you yet because you really don't know yourself outside of the narrative. What was it like to kind of step into, and the best way I can describe it is avoid, right? Because now it's like, okay,
Yes.
this doesn't feel good, but I don't know that I'm getting here yet. How did you work through that curiosity? And I literally have a show called Strip Down with a woman, Michelle, that we talk about this, like, what was it like going through that, like, stripping down phase?
So it was beautiful and the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my whole entire life.
Yeah.
Um, and but beautiful. And I love how you just described that. The void and curiosity. When you said those two words, I just like got chills. Curiosity, I was taken back to when I was a child. So I had memories of being a kid and that I'd forgotten, that I'd push out of the side. But I was a very inquisitive, curious, explorative kid who would just push the boundaries all the time. And I stopped doing that. I would like draw the line closer and closer behind, how far I could go. So all of this happened at one time, but it was all separate. And I know that sounds weird, but like I became a better father, a better husband, a healthier version of me, a better coworker, a better person. Um, and it started with food. So my first transition into this was okay. If I'm going to be well, I need to feed myself with wellness, right? Like what is actually well. Started with that, and then my journey through food actually helped my marriage, which is a different conversation for a different time. It's just very interesting how it all just played into one another. But I was introduced to a few mentors who, as I was shifting into this curiosity, and that's what it was. I started asking questions. I started like being curious about what have I been missing out on. Um, and these few people saw something in me that I didn't see at the time and gave me opportunities to tap into something that revolutionized the way I see the world. One was design thinking, and got in with this group of amazing people and was asked the question. Well, two things out of design thinking. One, it taught me to lead with empathy. So begin
Mm.
everything with the understanding of this other person that I'm speaking with or solving a problem for. How are they seeing the world? How are they interacting? How is this problem affecting them? So beginning with another person, and secondly, switching from this is a problem to how might we, and then fill in the blank, and shifting to solution automatically took me out of my negative rabbit hole into my positive creative ability that tapped back into my childhood. And that, and I didn't realize that until recently, but that was the turning point of me going from just this little void of what am I doing and like where am I? Because ultimately I was like, this is weird. I'm loving going to work. I'm not near as tired. I'm not having to sleep as much. I'm spending more time with my daughter. I'm all these things, but it felt very unfamiliar. And then the curiosity and tapping into my true essence is what actually drove me in that direction, and not looking back. And then I
Yeah.
would say the other thing is switching what I was feeding myself with negative feedback loops of who I was talking to, what I was talking about on the way to work and leaving work, and just feeding this negative feedback loop to seeking out who's done this and who's done it well. And like that's, I talk about Wayne Dyer a lot. I listened to him on the way to work and on the way home, and it just helped me walk into work and be like, cool, I'm here to serve, and I'm here to like bring joy to other people and to be a human for another human. And those were the biggest tools that I used to help in that void.
Well, I want to touch on a couple points. One, for anybody who's curious, Wayne Dyer, the cool thing about him particularly is that you see his own evolution unfold in his books. And
Yes.
that's what I really like about him outside of a lot of the other, great thought teachers is that you see his ego
Yeah.
start to shed throughout all of his works, right? So I love Wayne Dyer too. But what I really like and what I want the community to hear and your community here is you took action. So you recognize that there needed to be a change and then you took action. And one of the big pieces to that I hear a lot of times is we know we're feeding our mind negative stuff, but
Yeah.
we don't change it. We
Right.
might we might add exercise. We might change the way we eat. We might add water, take away the alcohol. But because our brain, the way it seeks information, looks for things so that way we can be in survival mode, which we don't need to be anymore. We seek out that fear. Most people won't take the action into saying, what am I feeding this supercomputer, this
Yes.
sponge? And what do I need to be feeding it to then shift my perspective? And I think if I had a venture to say, I know it's true for me, that was paramount in helping you become who you are today, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. And the crazy cool thing is that action that I took, I had no idea who to reach out to. So I'm very thankful that my journey happened in a time where I could Google things and, seek out, because of that, I was able to build my own toolkit based on, I call it my own Justice League. And it's the people that sit around my mental table that when I'm helping someone, I will just feel and hear and see Bob Proctor stand up from a table, and just like the things that he taught me are able to help someone else now. And then Wayne Dyer and like so many, but it's cool because that's what happens is Wayne Dyer's teaching exactly what you said. His evolution from ego to not ego, from ego to spirit, is beautiful. And he talked about that a lot. He was like, I'm not ashamed of my early books because this lets you know what chapter of my life I was in, just like we're in it. And
Yeah.
so that's super awesome. But like I didn't anyone to help guide me through this. And so ultimately, that's what I want to do for people, is to help provide them, to be that guide, to be that person to say, you're going through this because of many different reasons, but the way that Wayne Dyer resonated with me might not resonate the same with you. And, just like the Bible, the Quran, like the Tao, all of it has the same, we can quote the scripture out of all of them, but it's going to have different meanings for both of us because we've had a different experience in life. And
Yep.
that's the beauty of it. That is the beauty of the way that this is set up. And so from that, me seeking out and not just not listening and then going back to work and being like, okay, this is nonsense. But actually putting that into action was key. And, I think I've shared this with you last time. I say it often. A thought without action is just hallucination. So otherwise, like, I mean, if you don't put it into action, it's not real. Your body's not going to perceive that as real. And so you're just going to have thoughts and then they're going to continue. But yes, putting that into action, and it's uncomfortable. It's crazy
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And then it's not, like, you do it
And
so
then
many
it is
times
again.
and then it's
It,
like,
it
oh, this is normal.
Yeah, but then it becomes uncomfortable again because our souls are meant for expansion. So
There you
you're
go.
going into comfort, having learned, and then you get brought back to discomfort. The only difference is you've built this resiliency and this understanding and self-trust that you're now able to recognize, okay, I can weather this because I weathered this.
Right.
Something you said that I love that I've never thought about before, and it's so true, is like you form this own justice league, right? Of
Yeah.
people in your head.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
done something similar. I've never quite articulated it that way, but these great teachings, these great souls I lean into, and am guided by. And as you were saying that, I was thinking the quote, we stand on the shoulders of giants, but I always had a visceral reaction to that, because if we know that we are all connected, I don't stand on anybody's shoulders, but I do stand side by side. And that
Right.
is the table, right? It's
Yeah.
so
Yep.
that's really beautiful. And
Yeah.
lastly, if you're not going to take action, it's a definition of insanity, because it's assuming that doing the same thing over and over is going to get you different results, and it's
Right.
not. And the reality is it is going to be scary. The change is going to be difficult. And yet, despite that, you achieve a peace and a self-love and a self-trust that is far greater than you can ever begin to imagine, just staying where you are. And so you mentioned you didn't have anybody really guide you. You sought out. I'm similar. So now you're supporting people in healthcare, and I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, organizations, so that they can shift out of their old way of thinking about
Yes.
how to do business in healthcare, that so that they can create an environment and a culture that is conducive to the health of their employees, so that those employees can offer the impactful services and care needed to help the people in America in our healthcare system, correct?
That is 100% correct. And it's not the traditional model of, let me come in and help you create a way to have healthy employees, but rather, let's actually use innovation for what it is, instead of just the sexy term that is popping up in businesses. But let's use innovation to allow your people to be part of the process. My favorite thing to do is to create education designs specifically for organizations, primarily in healthcare, but allowing the frontline staff, for example, to be a part of the education creation, because they're the ones that need it. And if they're a part of it, they're going to use it. And the byproduct is you're going to have better patient care, happier employees. And so that's just one aspect of that. And when someone's happy, when they feel like they are aligning with purpose and they're helping and they're a part of the team, trust is automatically there, buy-in is there, and the byproducts are just everything that organizations are after. You're just not having to work as hard for it, because now this is a system in place that allows people to become their best self through the process. And so back, very similar to, when I said our experiences have been different throughout life, so we're going to interpret things different. The same way, like in healthcare, for example, if myself and another nurse are needing to do a task or a skill, we both have an understanding of this skill, but we both have knowledge gaps that are different because we have different experiences. So allowing me to go after my own knowledge gaps is a way more beneficial education tool than to say, this is what you need to know. Here's the presentation. This is what you need to know. Now do it. No. Like,
Yeah.
let's go over it and then let me practice. Let me fail, because once I fail, it's like riding the bicycle. Like once I fail, I know exactly what not to do. And then I get beyond that and I keep progressing. And the knowledge gaps, they're kind of like Swiss cheese, they just start getting less and less till I get to the point where I'm confident and competent. And
Yeah.
that is my passion within education.
Organization.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it goes, I'm sitting here thinking, so I have a huge issue with our educational system, right? So because
Yeah.
I believe, so take for example my daughter, right? She wants to be an artist. Do I think she needs basic math skills? Absolutely. Do you need finances? For sure, but you need to take all these courses, right? Just because that's
Right.
your gap in knowledge? Not really, because you want to be an artist. And I think that transfers to all companies. And what you're alluding to is that let's focus on the area that person needs to become a master at, so that they
Yeah.
can offer the best care and feel empowered, right, to
Right.
be able to give that care, rather than like a blanket of education and just assuming everybody needs all that information. I mean, in
Right.
healthcare, sure, it's a little bit more tricky, but you're right on in that, if you've been drawing blood for 20 years, you don't need a refresher course on drawing blood. You
Right.
may need a course on interpersonal skills because you draw blood and never talk to the
There you go.
patient, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Because then you've entered into pure competency and you're either, that's the beauty of it, because the goal in becoming competent is being able to provide human contact and emotional support while you're doing whatever role you're competent at. I will always remember there was a physician. I admire him. I learned so much through the years of working with him. We had a bad situation. We had a patient who we were resuscitating, and I look up, and this physician is doing chest compressions while consoling the parents. The parents were in the room, and he was emotionally supporting them while providing life support for this child. And that blew me away, because that is competency. That is us not having to think about what we're doing, but we can be a human for someone else. And
Yeah,
ultimately, that's what healthcare is. We are a human service industry that I believe have gone away from the human service element. And so, how do
I
we
agree.
become emotionally intelligent enough to where we can know our job so well, and that we can be, um, that person that this family or this patient is needing.
Yeah. Well, but it's interesting because I'm thinking about our own personal journeys, and I can only speak for the journeys that I've taken businesses through, because at one point I did business coaching. I don't anymore. Um and my clients' journeys, and it's messy. And so, how do you overcome that barrier with executives, the organizational decision makers, to say, let's shift the way in which we operate? But the reality is when we do it, it's gonna be a little messy and sticky and
Yeah.
icky for a while for everybody, because now you're asking frontline workers who probably don't always have trust in the hierarchy,
Yeah.
um, to shift perspective. You're asking the hierarchy, the decision makers, to completely change how it is they experience business. What do you do to get that buy-in?
That is an excellent question, and it's an ongoing challenge. Like, I mean, 100%, that's a challenge. There's always going to be those people that are saying, why do we need to do this? Like, we've always done it this way and it's worked. Right. And that's the hardest message to get beyond, because that is a paradigm that is very difficult to crack. One thing that I identified, especially within healthcare, and I'm sure it's in other industries as well, is so design thinking is human centric. It's human centric focus. So when I would pitch things to the executive level, for example, it was not received very well. When I pitched this to frontline, it was received great, because they were the product of what this was going to improve upon. Right.
Yep.
What I left out is I've since changed it to continuous innovation, because innovation just for the sake of innovation is basically like hallucination. Like, if you change one thing and then forget about it, you're going to be right back into the same situation.
Yeah.
Very similar to what you said. We're always in, like our spirit is always for expansion. If we stop expanding, that's our own fault because we are allowing ourselves just to stay here and we're like, we don't want to go forward. Very, very similar to innovation. What I figured out is innovation is not just about human design, but it's the crossroad of the world of possibility, human design, and systems design. So all of those have to be in alignment and all of those have to be balanced when you speak about these things. So if you change a human element, there has to be a systems aspect that is associated with that is either changed or enhanced, as well as creating this world of curiosity through this world of possibility. Because if you're in a world of saying this will never happen, this will never work, nothing I say after that is going to work. So
Yep.
we have to get into the curiosity mindset of, wait a minute, what do we want? And what, in a perfect world, no limitations, what would this look like?
Yep.
Starting there, then you can start tapping into the human design and the systems design and then start piecing it all together. But I think knowing your audience, because like you said, the exec level and the front line, it's two different conversations. And it took
Yeah.
me a really long time to figure that out, and had a lot of not so good conversations, but that was practice.
Well, it is, and you're
Yeah.
constantly practicing, and it's so funny because I know my audience and I show up the way I am anyway, and
Yeah.
I get rejected a lot, especially by, like, board of directors and stuff, but I'm okay with it because I also recognize the change is inevitable.
Yeah.
We cannot sustain the way in which we do business. We just can't because too many are starting to become aware that they need to nurture and take care of themselves.
Right.
And when your frontline workers are no longer willing to tolerate and accept things the way they are, there's going to be pushback. So that's when I know for like my personal self, eventually, you know, somebody's going to need my services because that's what I offer.
Right. Right.
However, I do love that you were able to recognize who you're speaking to and adjusting for, you know, recognizing that you do need to have, the education, the technology, all of it in coherence to make sure that it
Right.
supports the overall system changes and changes within culture and environment. So that's amazing. So you shared with me before we jumped on that you're going to be
Yeah.
speaking at a summit. Talk to me about all the good, juicy stuff.
Yeah, so it's about the sustainability of change, and subtitled "An Inside Job." So exactly what we just talked about is, how do you use innovation to create an internal change from not just a top-down approach, but a bottom-up, top-down, all the way around approach, and how to make it fun. Design thinking has all kinds of amazing fun tools that can, a lot of people say, I'm not that creative. Give me 5 minutes and you will give me some amazing ideas. And it's just that ability to tap out of your analytical mind and into your creative mind. And it's super easy if you have the tools and if you're in a space that you have permission to do so. And so meeting with amazing group of nonprofit individuals that, and we're going to be walking through how do you create sustainable change within your organization, and how do you create the balance that you're seeking and through innovation.
Yeah. You touched on something that is not just relevant for employees within companies, and it's having permission, right? Because there is
Yes.
that big fear that if I share my truth, if I actually take steps in this change thinking, that I'm not going to be punished, right? And that's a
Right.
real fear. But I'm curious, we also have to give ourselves permission
Yes.
to change,
Yes.
to shift our view on something, to shift our emotional experience around something. And when we give ourselves permission, then the world opens up to a whole new world possibilities.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
And just to tag in on that, if you have a significant other in your life, speaking with them and having them to give you permission as well. One thing that I learned that was so impactful for our marriage was she is changing. That is who she is. I'm just like I'm changing. I do not have permission to stop that change. If I'm trying to keep her from being who she needs to become, then I'm in the way. And
yep.
likewise, and what we've seen is, we're human. We step in, and sometimes we don't like the change because it's coming really quick. But what we have found is if we step out of the way and just support one another, both of us surpass the other, and it's like, come on up here, the water's great, right? Like I'm learning new things and I'm teaching you, and then you're going to fly by me and you're going to teach me, and we're just going to keep growing together and faster. And that is the harmony from permission. And I mean, I could go on about permission for a long time. It's a beautiful concept, and it requires trust and an environment of just like, I don't want to walk out of the room and think, what are they going to think about me, or am I going to be in trouble? And that's at work. So, and I
Yeah.
need to have permission, a safe space to think, to say what I need to say, to brainstorm. And that's how true innovation can change
And
the world.
I'm going to circle back real quickly. I think true permission is loving ourselves enough to give ourselves permissions, whether our significant others are bought on or not. Now, I, like you,
Yeah.
are in a partnership where, unconditional love for me is just that, unconditional, meaning my job is not to stifle you or tell you how you need to show up in the world. My job is to love you wherever you're at, whether
Right.
you're within your mess, whether you're within growing, whether you're in, and the minute that I create judgment right around that, that's not unconditional love. So that's not, to me, a partnership. But to get there, for me to be have been able to get to a place where I can show up and love for my partner like that, I had to give myself permission to be me. I
Right.
had to be able to say, this is who I am, stripped down. The world may take it or leave it, and I'm still unwilling to not be this version of myself. And when you can do that, you find the environment, the work environment, that will give you permission,
Right.
because you've already established, this is who I am, and you don't have to have that fear. And that's why I love what I do, and I love that you work with individuals as well as organizations, because that, to me, is true power, is saying I'm unapologetically me, and I'm not willing to waver on who I
Yeah.
am to fit into this organization or this, you know, expectation, wherever that is.
Yeah. And I think that is beautiful. It's beautiful to be the unapologetic you, because then you can create what you want, as opposed to just going into what everyone else needs you to be. And that is probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned, was that I can, and it's not even following the crowd, because I was extroverted. I still am a little extroverted. I'm a little both, but I would hide behind my extroversion because that's who the group needed me to be. Well, now sometimes I just need to be quiet. I
Yeah.
need to be quiet. I don't care what the group needs, because I need to be quiet for me. And that is huge. And even recognizing. So I totally get that. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because, and then that's another like ongoing lessons that I'm learning within myself is, two of the greatest affirmations I ever told myself was, I am well. And I said it until I was well. And I still say it because I am well and I am enough. And
Mm.
those two affirmations have the power to change anything in your life. And it doesn't happen like that. It takes a while, but like, it's almost like you're telling yourself, you're giving
You're
yourself
willing it.
pep talks until
Yep.
you're like, oh heck yeah, I believe it now. Like I am enough. I'm well. Let's do this.
Yep.
And
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, Eric, is there anything you want to leave the audience with that we haven't touched upon?
Oh, I think we hit on most of it. I want people to understand that I don't think we will ever reach our full potential. Like, because I think we're so powerful as individuals and as groups that we will never hit it. But the journey of reaching that potential is so beautiful, and it allows that permission. When I do something, it permits someone else to do it. And the foundation of everything I do is based upon the South African term Ubuntu. And it simply means I am because we are. And that experience known as life has allowed me to be with and interact with so many different people who have taught me along the way. You've done the same. You've experienced life and had all these great teachers. And some of our greatest teachers were some of our greatest trials, right? And that concept that I bring to the table, that you bring to the table, that everyone brings to the table, like that's the value that we bring. It's not just me versus the world, but it's us together. And I am simply me because you're part of that, because
Yep.
my family's part of that, everything that I've associated with. And so the more we chase after this potential, like the bigger this idea gets. And that's what I'm about is tapping into people's true attributes as opposed to focusing on the things that they don't live up to. Awesome. They might not live up to one thing, but they're crushing 10 other things and nailing it. Let's highlight that. Let's shift
Yeah.
this world into the positives of what people are doing as opposed to pointing out the negativities that come up.
Yeah. And I love that. To that point, I don't touch anything that I don't love to do with my business. I pass it off. And a lot of people could be like, they could have this perception. And I'm like, that's like taking a fish and putting them on a tree and expecting them to know how to climb it. It's not that
Yes.
the
Yes.
fish could eventually figure it out, well,
Yeah.
die, but you know what I mean? But the reality is, it's not that I can't do it. It's that that's not my zone of genius and I don't need to do it. And so
Yep.
when we can do that, we're really powerful. For everybody, Eric, where can they find you? And of course, I will add your information in show notes as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm most active on LinkedIn, a little bit on Facebook, and then I have some information on my website as well that we will share in the comments.
Awesome. Beautiful.
Cool.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been a gift, guys. If you are curious to learn more about Eric, please reach out to him. And I feel very honored to have been part of this conversation.
Oh, it was an honor for me. I appreciate it. This was awesome. Thank you so much.